Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Nick Kanoki, Director of Technology for the Asset Leadership Network, and I am very excited for a conversation with Peter Kohler and Mike Bordonaro today. Sally was unfortunately unable to join us. But before we get underway, we just want to thank our Platinum organizational member, Onuma System, as well as ALN patron members, Definitive Logic, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Jacobs. And thanks to all our organizational members, your continued support makes programming like this possible. And if you're out there watching and thinking you might like to work with us or just start the conversation, please reach out. We would love to hear from you. If you're interested in participating in any future programs, email us at info@assetleadership.net. This one is specifically about the airports from last week's program, but we will surely be having upcoming programs, so please reach out with any comments, questions, or feedback. And with that, Mike Bordonaro, Executive Director, welcome.
Thank you, Nick, and I'm glad you mentioned the concept of having people reach out to us for program concepts. We're finding that this discussion with minimal PowerPoint slides is very interesting and engaging to people. And I want to thank all of the people who will be watching this in the future, because we're also finding that people enjoy having this recorded and the ability to watch it and probably put it at 1.5 or 2 times the regular speed in order to go through it a little quicker. But we appreciate everyone who is enriching their knowledge about asset management. And Peter Kohler, thank you for joining us again, waking up a little bit early in Australia, 7 a.m. there at this point, tomorrow. So thank you for coming to us from the future. How are things looking in the future, Peter?
It's a nice, bright, rainy day, actually, here where I am in the Southern Highlands of New South Wales and in Australia. So, and rainy days are nice because this is kind of typically bushfire season. So rainy days is the opposite of bushfires. So rainy days are good. Yeah, very good. Yep.
Excellent. And we're happy to have you join us because the value and benefits from asset management web series that the Asset Leadership Network and the Asset Management Council have been doing for more than 2 years now. We've got 10 programs and 20 different owners have shared their values and benefits that they've gained. And we time it so that it's good for the Australian market. 8 a.m. in the morning is a good time for Australia for their web programs. We get astounding attendance. We've had 325 people at one of the programs earlier this year. We always get over 100 people, and that is the strength of the Australian market and interest in asset management. But it's like 5 or 6 p.m. Washington, D.C. time in the U.S., and so the ALN doesn't contribute to it as much. But we want to have on record why we're doing this, why it's important, and kind of explain to people how the value and benefits series progresses. And why don't we start, Peter, with explaining why we thought this series was important?
Well, many of us are passionate about the subject of asset management, as indeed you and Nick are. But the real issue is not our passion; it's actually igniting the passion in everyone else. And so, how do we do that? Well, a number of ways. But one way is to talk about the value and benefits that the discipline of asset management can create, not just for individuals, but organizations as well. So that's from a financial point of view, from a technical point of view, from a risk point of view, from a custom point of view, all that sort of stuff. So it's about the value and benefits webinar series is really about showcasing organizations that have successfully applied the discipline and the value and benefit they've got out of that, whatever that might mean in terms of what their business is trying to do. So we're focusing. I have to say quickly, I should say that it's when we talk to organizations, and Mike, you can talk to this too. One of the challenges we always have is that, and they always have, is we say we want measurable value. So we don't want too many of the feel good things. Feel good things are nice, but at the end of the day, it's shareholder price and it's profit margins and or a significant reduction in risk that we really the discipline can provide. So it's those kind of things that we're really interested in seeing. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about the discipline, but it's also got to produce something.
And one of the things that we like is the international aspect of this. Asset management is, it's been around since before the pyramids, but the publication of ISO 55000 took it up a step. And it is now a recognized profession around the world to be an asset manager. And it is acknowledging that it is work that does have international impact. So yes, the measurable value is for your organization, but as we'll discuss later, there's also measurable value for society. And having this global relationship with the Asset Management Council and expanding it, we're talking with PMAC, and Peter was just in France, talking with people at French asset management organization.
IFRAMI, yep.
And I see that we have attendees from Canada, Colombia, and even New Zealand. I got to quickly say to Raymond, Longsight is a great .co.
Is that Raymond Tan, is it?
It probably is, but I love the concept of Longsight, which is basically what this value and benefits from asset management is talking about, is the long-term value.
Yep.
So Nick has agreed to stick around and be the voice of all the attendees. Please feel free to share things in the chat, or Nick will just read your minds and kind of know when to ask us something. So the first thing I want to do, and we don't like to do slides too much, but I'm going to really quickly share my screen and go to not this PowerPoint, but our template, so that people understand where we start from. So we have a template set of slides so that all the presentations are similar. Nothing's ever been the same, but we want to follow ISO 55001 basically, and let people have a chance to talk about their organizational context, the objectives of their asset management project or activity. We should probably put policy in there also. What their challenges are, what the scope is, the outline of the asset management activities, the measurable value, and lessons learned. We also have a unintended benefits, because so many people that we know who implement asset management share excellent benefits that weren't even part of their objective. But when you do things right, things line up. And we're starting to talk about how to incorporate the concept of how your activities line up with your national sustainability goals, and if you line up with international sustainability goals, like the UN sustainability goals. So that's just a quick overview. Peter, what made you want to decide to start talking about national and international sustainability?
Largely because they're important, and I mean that's a kind of a dumb answer, but it's self-evident really. But certainly in Australia, right? For example, I mean, I can't talk about the US or anywhere else, but with any great authority. But people might argue I can't talk with great authority about Australia either. But that's another issue for the moment. In Australia, we have national infrastructure plans and state infrastructure plans and local infrastructure plans, and they're all theoretically linked. Sometimes they're broken. Politics is an interesting art, isn't it? But in general, though, most political parties in Australia tend to view those infrastructure plans with what's the word? some importance. So they're not to be ignored, or not. They're not to be. If we're collectively going to get on with each other, we can't. You can't just say that we're going to ignore those national and state infrastructure plans. So you have to kind of support them. There's always different solutions. People look at objectives and come up with a different solution, but it's always about those objectives. And so in Australia, there is as I said, a consensus that these things have got to be logically related. And so in that context, sustainability, environmental awareness, and improving the environment, because it's not always good, supporting the environment as an example, as sustainability. The word sustainability can mean interesting things to interesting people, but the United Nations has 17 sustainability goals. If you look at those 17, they're quite interesting. It'd be interesting to know how they decided that those goals are relevant. But we can talk about that possibly later on. But it's important to understand that nationally, internationally, we all live on this one planet. You wouldn't think so sometimes when you look at the news, that we have to kind of get along with each other and support each other. And so Australia, whilst we have a commitment to ourselves, we also have a commitment to the global environment as well. And so the whole notion of national, international, measures and sustainability. I know it's the term today, sustainability, but in linking to those, I think is important logically, and I think morally as well.
Indeed, we, as Nick said in the chat, admire that you're that mature in Australia to be talking about your state and national goals and asking organizations to contribute to their successful achievement.
Mike, I'm just remembering a previous speaker was talking about in a city doing infrastructure updates and how, bridge people may not necessarily be working with, water people and electrical people when they're doing a bridge overhaul, when really they should, because they're gonna, they could do these things at different times and kind of do a bunch of work, undo a bunch of that work, rather than doing it all at once with a little more planning, forethought, and communication. And sustainability is super important, and we all know the value of efficiency. And so just bringing that into the conversation as well.
Well, and that's what we're trying to do with this, is to rapidly deploy best practices. And business is now a global activity. And whatever's being done that's best in Australia, we need to explore and examine and see how it can be best in this country and other countries too.
I mean, when I was much younger, it was pretty common for the local council to come and rip up the road because they wanted to replace some water pipes, and then 3 months later, the road people would do the same because they want to do something else, and then 3 months after that, the electricity people would do the same, and that became kind of blindingly obvious that we needed to share information rather than share information and plans rather than continue on then this silo route, right? The ignoring the fact that we're not part of society. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Ignoring the fact that you're not part of society inevitably means it's going to be really costly and not get a good outcome for the community either.
Yes, that might have been the Michigan Infrastructure Council, which developed a Dig Once program for the state of Michigan, where they have basically a dating service where you mark the road that you need to do work on, and if you match with somebody who needs to do work on that same road, you get connected and can schedule things together.
So it also means, Mike, that organizations have to share information and data, and so the digital environment provides the ability to do that sort of stuff really quickly these days. So as a solution to some of the problems that we have, the digital environment is and documenting that digital environment. Most councils and state governments, certainly in Australia, have been doing that for quite a few years now. So and I imagine people around the world have been, as you're highlighting, would do the same because of the same issues we're talking about.
We got
Yeah.
We got 1 out of 50 states doing it. That's why I keep mentioning it.
Oh,
We need
okay.
we're trying to have other states get interested in this Michigan Infrastructure Council approach. And that's one of our initiatives. So, Nick, looks like you've got something to say.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, Peter's anecdote of remembering the road getting dug up every few months, by a different kind of branch of the same, well, it gets back to value. They're thinking about their task at hand rather than we're doing all this for the user experience, for the public, for these services that we want to provide people. And in trying to keep the pipes, good, we're tearing up the road every few months because we're not thinking big picture enough. We're not working together to think of the whole user experience, the whole value to the public, which is allowing people to go about their daily business, turn on their tap and get water, drive down the road, all these things. So just I like the value and benefits title because it brings us back to that big picture where we can really, I think, see what connects us all, which is,
one of the great advantages of all that is maybe traditionally in the past we've become asset centric rather than looking at the benefit to the community centric. In other words, we're interested in water assets, we're interested in power assets, we're interested in road assets. Well, that kind of misses the point, really. Yes, they're important, but they're not more important than everyone else or every other asset class. So it's about understanding what does the community want, what do the people want, and this comes down to the infrastructure strategy and so forth. It's not about asset class. It's actually really about what can the community benefit from all of this, and how should we think about these things differently than we have in the past. So we're now most of the world is now thinking about the issues from the perspective of what's the value and benefits to the community of what we're doing, as distinct from water assets and power assets and road assets and all the other stuff. So walking away and recognizing that asset-centric is kind of okay, but it's not good enough. It's not good enough.
So let's really quickly, I said we don't like to do slides, but let's really quickly, I'm going to share my screen and give an example of some of the presentations so that people get a real quick idea. So earlier this year, Denver International Airport did a presentation, and they've got a lot of assets in a 53 square mile property. And this is what happens to their property. That kind of explains why they need asset management on a very high level. And so they show the different things and provide. And this was a transportation focused program. So John Hardwick, New South Wales Transport Asset Management Branch Executive Director, presented. And here's one picture showing a very important asset. And they were talking about the painting of that. And John was talking about the source of the issues that led to New South Wales Transport really focusing on all their different assets and provided information.
Yes, it's really about understanding how do all those individual asset classes deliver benefit to the community. So one thing that John and his team have brought to Transport for New South Wales is that focus, rather than the traditional roads perspective, the traditional other perspectives we talked about. John and his team have been very successful in convincing various governments that the focus should always be on value and benefits to the community, as distinct from we need to improve our roads. That sort of stuff.
Yeah, John was one of the reasons why we had 325 earlier this year when he presented with Kimon Onuma in the Los Angeles Community College District. All right, so I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview of those types of presentations. And Peter, what's the feeling in Australia about this program and its impact for the Asset Management Council?
That's a really interesting question, that one. one of the things where we got our conference coming up next year, and one of the things a couple of us are doing is having a whole series of presentations on why has the Asset Management Council been successful, and that what you are now asking aligns with the potential answers to that question. Why has the ALN Council been been successful in what it's been trying to do? I think our objective that we started
It's
off with.
my understanding that it's one of the. It's my understanding it's one of the most well-attended programs that the Asset Management Council has.
Oh, absolutely. In terms of the numbers that participate in the webinars, yes, and in terms of the interest at our annual conference, yes, and that's largely because of why we did it, which is the highlighting the value and benefits that it can bring. We often get a lot of people get very immersed in the process and sometimes forget about the outcome. Yeah, and so the whole process of what the Asset Management Council is about, as an example, is important, but we should never lose sight of the objective and the aim. It's the same with the discipline of asset management. A lot of us are involved in the technical and financial and the risk details of how we do things, but we should never lose sight of what the ultimate aim or objectives or the gains or the benefits, however we want to, whatever language we want to use. We should never forget about those and link what we do to that. Yeah, and so you always have to have the end game in mind, right? As people often say. Yeah. So, but sometimes you lose sight of that. But the benefit for me from the obvious, I think, the interest from the members of the AIM Council is very much because of that. That yes, for many years we got focused on the detail of how you do things, but at the end of the day, the how is there to deliver the why and deliver the value.
So Douglas asks a real important question, or makes a statement about the challenge of being able to say how much benefit and how much value there's going to be.
Yep.
That's why we're doing this, is to have
Yep.
some level of benchmarking. Now, you might be a water organization and you might
Yep.
look at a transportation organization
Yep.
that's doing something similar to what you're doing. It's not going to be directly applicable to water, but there is starting to be a body library of information about what you can expect from an asset management.
One of the things I remember about 20, 25, 30 years ago in New South Wales, where I am, the people would ask things like, if a train is delayed by an hour, what's the cost to the community? Because if you can't answer that question, you can't actually put a value on what you're doing. I mean, value here is financial, yes, but at the end of it, because that's what most people understand. And indeed, and you can't do your FAMICAs, failure mode effect criticality analysis, and all the RCM stuff that follows that if you don't have a concept of what's the opportunity cost. Yeah? If the train's down for an hour, what's the cost to the community? Because that's an important number to know. Now, if you have 2,500 people on a train and it's down for an hour, or your people are late for an hour, or you have a whole series of trains that are late for an hour, the cost to the community is, I remember this very much because this is a very emotive subject. It was $18.50 per passenger per hour. How do you get to $18.50? Well, you can argue about that $18.50, and there are always different ways of looking at that. But what it really did do is hone in on the issue of what is the value to the community of things like transport services. And so that concept now has rolled out into many other industries where you spend some time thinking about the issue of if this asset is down for an hour, or this system is down for an hour, or this train is down for an hour, what is the actual, what are we actually doing? What's the impact to the community of that? A number of ways you can talk about that, but certainly financial is an interesting one. But without doing the hard yards, that intellectual effort of how do you get to $18.50, and then generally everyone thinking that that's a reasonable number, then at least you now have a common basis to walk forward from.
So the asset management, that was good. Thank you, Peter. And the Asset Management Council is running the technology for the series of programs. So Peter, will you explain how the Asset Management Council makes the videos and PowerPoints available?
Well, there's nothing revolutionary here. It's standard sort of practice, isn't it? I mean, ALN does the same thing where it has a process of how a webinar is enabled, supported and delivered, and then the library of those webinars is now put up so that people can review those. But the ALN Council, like the ALN, has been doing that for many years. I don't think there's anything unique in that.
Well, we just put our stuff up free for anybody in the world to look at anytime they want. But I believe the process is there is some level of registration. You don't need to pay money, but you have to
I see.
register on your website
I
and
see.
give an email address, and then permission is allowed to.
Yep. So I didn't know that was a detail you wanted to go to, but yes. Generally these webinars are not paid for. You don't have to pay for them. They're generally 99% of them are you just have to register, and if you're a member, that's okay too. If you're not a member, that's okay too. The aim is always to get people involved in these conversations, get people involved in the discipline of asset management. And so, how do you do that? Well, you don't actually. You probably get more people involved if you reduce the fees associated with participating. So yes, yeah.
So Raymond is making a good point about benchmark for quantifying value. I think that's kind of what we're starting to do. We're trying to establish that on a global level. And when we have more of these accumulated, then we'll be able to look at and say, if you're a transportation organization, this is maybe something you should be looking at.
Raymond's point is Raymond Tan's his name. How are you, Raymond? I can tell already who it is, but it is well made. They're about industry benchmarks, and that's what I was referring to. And no doubt that figure now has been revised, but the point is that there needs to be a generally accepted way of looking at those sorts of things. Just like in Australia now, and I don't know around the rest of the world, but what's the cost to the community of a human life? If you don't have an answer for that question, it's very difficult to design something that the community will agree with in terms of the probability of death. So there are generally accepted standards in Australia now that the federal government puts that out, and generally people use that. So that's one of the benchmarks one of the key benchmarks too. That if you're designing something to be safe, you need to understand the opportunity cost associated with people, right? And so, in other words, what's the cost to the community of a human life? And now that's very emotional, but you can easily do that by what's the GDP of a country divided by the number of people, and come up with a number. And generally, that's what the basis of that number is. Although there's some permutations and combinations of that kind of approach, but at least it gives a relatively robust idea of from a financial point of view, even though it sounds a bit crass, of the financial benefit of a human being. So when you're designing things, you need to know that sort of stuff as well.
So we're going to be wrapping up for those who have to leave at the half hour. But since we have Ray Tan online, Ray, if you want to become a panelist and talk with Peter and give us a perspective from New Zealand, we would love to welcome you. So send us a text. And while Nick is doing the traditional wrap up before we go into overtime, if you're interested, Raymond, I'll make you a panelist.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Peter. I know this was a bit early in the morning for you in Australia, so really appreciate your time here and your thoughts and for sharing with us. And we'll catch Sally next time. And big thanks to our Platinum organizational member, Onuma, and our patron members, Definitive Logic, ABS Quality Evaluations, CGI, and Jacobs, as well as all our organizational members. Really appreciate the continued support for programming like this in our newsletter. And again, we would love to partner with every organization in the world. So please reach out if you want to start the conversation. And Mike, it sounds like Raymond's interested, so maybe, and you've promoted him to a panelist. Right before we get into that, can I just mention Chris Silkey's post to the chat was to some degree saying that you can estimate. Peter was doing a very good job of saying shorthand, here's one way to estimate the cost per person on a train that's late to the community. And I was just thinking in my head, Chris's point about people are not equally harmed. When you get down into the granular level, some people, they're a little late to work, no big deal. Other people, maybe they lose that job that they needed to keep their family afloat because of being, like that. It can get really serious really quick for the people that are in vulnerable positions in our society. So just to clarify or make that clear that there are really good ways to estimate, and then it's often maybe worse or a higher cost when there are inefficiencies to the society.
Just on that very point, Nick, in Australia, the Optus network, which is one of the internet providers and email providers, went down for 8 hours last week. That's going to cost them billions. It is actually going to cost them billions when they finally sort that out. Because what's the cost to the community of 1/2 of your internet service in a country out for 8 hours? You just figure that one out. And the answer is very large. Very, very large, yes. So that and what is promoted in Australia now is the conversation about, hang on, this is now not a money-making exercise when you think about those providers. It's our national exercise. Shouldn't we do something about this nationally? And what happens if two companies go broke providing internet services? What is the government going to do then? For example, the trains in New South Wales stopped for 8 hours because the internet service went down. Isn't that really interesting? Unfortunately, when it comes, when things go down, that's when people seem to find the reason for keeping them going. But it's a turning point, I reckon, in Australia that one of the telcos went down for 8 hours, and the cost to the community is huge.
Yes, sorry that happened. And Raymond, thank you for joining us. You're our
Raymond,
first
how are
guest
you?
from New Zealand.
Yes. Actually, on a topic of value, I'm currently working on a project, and a client has requested that I differentiate between value to the customer and value to the organization. And there has to be a balance in discussions, because everyone comes back again to how much am I going to invest in and how much I'm going to get from that investment. And I think this is where sometimes especially for a public organization, they try to sell the wrong message to the wrong people. So if you tell a commuter, I'm going to bring that much of a benefit, and it's going to cost you that much in rates or taxes or fees, you get straight away a reaction that's like, no, it's not going to work for me. But it's going to work for the organization because they get an additional income to actually deal with poor performing assets. So I guess going forward, it'd be really good, apart from having a benchmark or indices that we can use to tell a good story where everyone understands what it actually means, is actually having that discipline to actually quantify and define value from two different perspectives. And it makes asset managers' job much easier. And the other thing I'd like to add is, I think, I've been doing asset management for a while, and it's always, the same people that I talk to. I think we need to broaden that scope up to the wider audience, especially the politicians or even different organizations that doesn't know anything about asset management. And this is where I think there is a much better potential for an outreach to get everyone to understand some very basic, things that we talk about. They're not basic, they are pretty complicated. Try to do a FAMICA or FIVIA, it's really grunty stuff. But we need to kind of perhaps make it a bit simpler and tell them this is exactly what Peter has just alluded to. You're going to save in the long run. So that's me. I mean, really great discussion,
No, that's
guys.
us, Raymond. That was perfect. We're the Asset Leadership Network. That's exactly the people who we want to be talking to. So let's see what we can do to promote the best practices of New Zealand here, and vice versa. We can maybe help you reach out to some of your leaders.
Yes, yes, love to.
Okay. And what is it that you do in New Zealand?
Actually, I'm kind of, well, Peter knows. I'm just about to complete my PhD in asset management, so I've got my last couple of months left, and
Oh, very
and, I,
good.
and I'm doing a bit of consulting and also teaching in the background. So yeah, I'm looking forward to get on to, well, what I used to do 4 years ago, full time now. Yeah, so yeah, really excited
Well,
about it.
congratulations on that. And let's keep in touch. We should have a party when you get your PhD.
Yeah,
Or
yeah. I'll
maybe
come
a
and
couple of
visit
stories.
you. I'll come and visit you. So I guess for the last 3 years, I've been exactly doing that. My research topic is optimizing value in public sector organizations, and I've been, interviewing and talking to people and being actually immersed in projects within public sector organizations, and what it's actually really interesting. I hope to finish that, and perhaps I'll share that knowledge with more people. Yeah, that's my background.
Well, we'd love to have you highlight some of those on values and benefits from asset management in the future. So keep in mind. Good
Yes,
time.
will do.
And then Amelia had a question that we didn't get around to when Peter was in the heart of talking about the value of a human life. And
No, I said the cost to the community of human life, not the value, right? And because once you talk about value, that's a very emotional subject. The cost to the community is a bit more prosaic, right? And so please, it's important. That distinction is very important. It's not the value of human life, it's the cost to the community of a human life. And the words are important there. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I hope that. All right. So then there was a comment by financial benefit of a human being. So do you remember that? That might have just been while you were talking about this topic and might have used a different set of phrases, but it's the value to the community.
Yeah, I was talking about one of the simplest ways of determining, on average, the value of an individual life in a country to the country is looking at the GDP of that country and dividing it by the number of people in the country. That's generally often seen as a bit of a starting point to understand the value of human life to in a particular area of the world. Yeah.
Hope that addresses it. But
because that leads you into the notion of proportionality in terms of risk and how you then design, operate, and maintain a solution that delivers that proportional outcome. So in Australia, the notion of a human life is not just understanding the value of it, but then being able to articulate that what you've done is reasonably proportional in terms of risk, but what you've done is been supported by the notion of the value of the human life. Yeah. So I won't get into all the detail, but I can talk about that later if you want. Yeah.
We'll expect a white paper at the end of the week.
I'll just send you the paper that the federal government put together. Yep.
So, Raymond, people are interested.
Yes, I know. I know of an organization that took out that performance measure with human life because it's very controversial.
Yeah,
and there are a lot of discussions in the background that talks about not to quantify human life as such, but it's the actual impact, the dollar impact of a human life. And that's a slightly different discussion. It moves away from how much is your life worth, right? You can insure for 10 million or insure for a few 100,000 because that's what you can afford. But that's not the whole purpose of why we've been included in an asset management plan. And yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one. You're right, Peter. You can talk for days and argue and
get very emotional very quickly.
Yes, you do. So yeah, I'll leave that. It's a tricky one. Maybe perhaps we could all get together and write a white paper and tell it to the rest of the world, and that'll be great. Yeah.
After a bottle of wine. Yeah.
Yeah, after a bottle of wine.
So Raymond, there's questions about what asset management PhD look like. How did you get started? Where you getting this from? Is it online? Are you doing classes or are you doing
Oh, no,
mainly field?
I'm a student full-time at Massey University. And it came about, I mean, that's a little bit, I don't want to take up the entire session as to what happened to me.
Oh, the session's over. Don't worry.
Session's over.
We're just having
So,
fun.
so I've been working in the industry for, I don't know, 20 plus years right now. And I just find there is a bit of a kind of like there's a lot of practitioners' view, but it's a little bit of theoretical absence because the academia doesn't actually frame asset management the way we talk about asset management, right? So I thought, well, it's a good time. Perhaps I'll do a research on both sides of the fence and see if I could actually kind of, get rid of the fence completely. And it's been interesting. I mean, look, my own journey in the academia was very interesting. I had conversations with professors and, we were arguing exactly what asset management was, and this is where I got more and more interested, and I started to read more broadly. I started to look at different jurisdiction on how asset management has been regarded, and it's depending on who you talk to, it means different things. From the customer perspective, they also regard it differently because they hear it from someone else, third hand, fourth hand. And I think there is an opportunity for the profession and industry to get together. And I really appreciate you guys for doing it because you have broadened it to a different perspective and say, look, it's not just a localized challenge, it's actually a global challenge. Right. We talk about wrong infrastructure. People just absolutely refuse to pay for it. And then, that's something that I think, which is why it interests me quite a bit, to look at the philosophy of asset management, we keep talking it's a social technical system, but actually there isn't a lot done from a social perspective that doesn't, even in one of my interviews and discussion, we talk about the value of life, and I had to pause, right? Because instead of a 5-minute slot, it became half an hour just talking about it. So, these are things that perhaps we could make conversations like that much easier going forward, where we actually write things that both the academia and the practitioner find it useful. They could actually use it to talk to their clients. They could find it useful to talk to their bosses, the politicians, and everyone says, yeah, I know what you mean. So we are going to make the hard decisions, and this is the consequence of our decisions. Now that hasn't been discussed as good as I could like to. But I mean, look, it's an ongoing thing. Even when I've finished with it, I need to submit by next month. It will still be something that I'll be looking at it for a long time. Yeah, that's my passion. So, it's just by chance.
You're going to end up as a policy advisor to the NZ government, are you?
Well, I don't know about the policy bit, but look, we can be an advocate whether we are actually working for government or outside government, right? We need to do that, especially we're looking at public infrastructure that I think sometimes decisions are not made the way they should, and we all suffer because of that. So that's me.
Well, that's great. You brought it around circle because I think in order to have those discussions, there's got to be a solid base of understanding of values and benefits from existing asset management activities. A foundation point, a starting point for having those discussions. So thank you for basically complimenting us on what we have been doing. We appreciate that. I think that's a good ending point. Peter, do you have any other comments?
No, not at all. Other than I always enjoy these conversations from a personal point of view, but also I think from a societal point of view, these conversations, as Raymond's highlighting, we need to have more of them. So I don't know that you can have too many of them. Actually, you probably can, but anyway, you can OD on everything. But I think we need more of these discussions around the community. Yeah.
Mike, I saw Celia's question about AI and asset management, and I just wanted to offer briefly that there's probably a lot written out there, maybe not yet since it's such a kind of burgeoning, growing field at the moment, but I immediately think of predictive maintenance rather than reactive. You know, I feel like AI is really good at crunching numbers, using data to see patterns and predict. And so I immediately see AI being used to just improve the speed at which we can model future states with real-time data. But I'm sure there are going to be many uses going forward for AI.
And we should talk about the significant risks of doing what you just said too, Nick, by the way, because there are quite a few, legally as well. Legally as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like fire, Peter. It's a tool. You can use it to cook food, but you can't use it to burn down your neighbor's house because you don't like the color of it. So they're both powerful tools that need to be controlled by human beings. And I answered Cecilia's question by saying, we have had AI presentations. Platinum member Onuma Inc. has talked about putting 20,000 work orders from the California Community College District during our value and benefits presentation earlier in the year when there were 325 people. He talked about putting those 20,000 work orders into AI and asking it to start predicting what are some of the most common issues. What should we be thinking about? And AI gave a very reasonable and something that could be validated by humans. Yeah, those are the points. And they aligned with what anybody would say, but there's now a validity that is added because of AI. It's another tool in the tool belt, and it's a really sharp tool. So you got to be careful, but it's a very good tool. Well, from value and benefits of asset management to AI, we cover everything, whether it's on the agenda or not. So thank you to our audience, many of whom have stuck around. We appreciate the engagement. Special thanks to Raymond Tan for joining us, and a little, don't want to jinx you, but congratulations on almost finishing it. And I'm going to send you an email about how we can keep in touch and maybe give you a platform for talking about your dissertation through the Asset Leadership Network. I think that would be good. And Peter, it's been an honor and a privilege working with you these many years, and I look forward to more. And I think what we're doing is really good for society. So thank you. Nick, great job. And to all the audience, thank you very much for attending.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.